Doctor Who, An Unearthly Child, by Anthony Coburn. A street. Night. The time is 3 o'clock in the morning. It is dark and foggy. In the street, we hear the striking of a nearby clock. A policeman approaches, holding out his torch to see where he is going. He stops and turns around to examine the written notice on a pair of large gates. I. M. Foreman, Scrap Merchants, Totters Lane. The policeman pushes the gates, and as he walks away, they swing open. The camera slowly pans around the junkyard, finally coming to rest on a police box, from which comes an eerie humming sound, suggesting hidden power. A corridor in a school. Late afternoon. A small number of children, all about 14 or 15 years old, enter the corridor from a classroom. They are obviously going home. An older woman also leaves the classroom, their teacher, Barbara Wright. As she leaves, she turns back and speaks to someone still in the classroom.
"Wait in here, please, Susan. I won't be long."
Barbara walks down the corridor and enters another room. Science laboratory. Ian Chesterton, a science teacher, is sitting on a stool writing in a folder. Not gone yet?
Obviously not.
Ask a silly question.
I'm sorry.
It's all right. I forgive you this time.
Oh, I've had a terrible day. I don't know what to make of it.
What's the trouble? Can I help?
Oh, it's one of the girls, Susan Foreman.
Susan Foreman? Oh, she your problem too?
Yes.
But you don't know what to make of her?
No.
How old is she, Barbara?
15.
15. She lets her knowledge out a bit at a time so as not to embarrass me. That's what I feel about her. She knows more science than I'll ever know. She's a genius. Is that what she's doing with history?
Something like that.
So your problem is whether to stay in business or hand over the class to her?
No, not quite.
Well, what then?
Ian, I must tell someone about this, but I don't want to get the girl into trouble. And I know you're going to tell me I'm imagining things.
No, I'm not.
Well, I told you how good she is at history, and I had a talk with her, and I told her she ought to specialise. Well, she seemed quite interested till I said I'd be willing to work with her at her home. Then she said that'd be absolutely impossible, as her grandfather didn't like strangers.
He's a doctor, isn't he? That's a bit of a lame excuse.
Well, I didn't pursue the point, but then recently her homework's been so bad.
Ian gets up and starts to wash his hands. Yes, I know.
Finally, I was so irritated with all her excuses, I decided to have a talk with this grandfather of hers and tell him to take some interest in her.
Oh, did you indeed? How was the old boy like?
That's just it. I got her address from the secretary, 76 Totters Lane, and I went along there one evening. Oh, Ian, do pay attention.
Sorry, you went along there one evening?
Well, there isn't anything there. It's just an old junkyard.
You must have gone to the wrong place.
Well, that's the address the secretary gave me.
Well, the secretary got it wrong then.
No, I checked. There's a big wall on one side, houses on the other, and nothing in the middle. And this nothing in the middle is number 76 Totters Lane.
That's a bit of a mystery. Well, there must be a simple answer somewhere.
But what?
Well, we'll have to find out for ourselves, won't we?
Thank you for the we. She's waiting in one of the classrooms. I'm lending her a book on the French Revolution.
What's she going to do? Rewrite it? All right. What do we do? Ask her point blank?
No, I thought we could drive there and wait till she arrives and see where she goes.
Oh, all right.
Well, that is if you're not doing anything.
No, I'm not. After you. They leave the room. Classroom. Susan is listening to a small transistor radio which she holds to her ear. She is swaying to the music, gesturing strangely with her right hand, oblivious to the fact that Barbara and Ian have entered.
Susan? Oh, I'm sorry, Miss Wright. I didn't hear you coming in. Aren't they fabulous?
Who?
It's John Smith and the Common Men. They've come from 19 to 2. Huh?
John Smith is the stage name of the Honourable Aubrey Waits. He started his career as Chris Waits and the Carolers, didn't he, Susan?
You are surprising, Mr. Chesterton. I wouldn't expect you to know things like that.
Oh, I have an inquiring mind. And a very sensitive ear.
Oh, I'm sorry.
She turns off the radio. Thank you.
Is that the book you promised me? Yes. Thank you very much. It will be interesting. I'll return it tomorrow. Oh, that's not necessary. Keep it until you've finished it. I'll have finished it.
Where do you live, Susan? I'm giving Miss Wright a lift. I've room for one more.
No, thank you, Mr. Cheston. I like walking through the dark. It's mysterious. Be careful, Susan. There'll probably be fog again tonight. See you in the morning. I expect so. Good night. Good night.
Good night, Susan. Ian and Barbara leave the classroom. As soon as they have gone, Susan opens the book and starts to read. She frowns and mutters to herself in indignation.
That's not right.
Corner of Totter's Lane. Ian and Barbara are in a car. Ian is driving. He puts on the handbrake and switches off the engine and the lights.
Over there.
Lucky there was no fog. I'd never have found this.
Well, she doesn't seem to have arrived yet. I suppose we are doing the right thing, aren't we?
She looks at Ian. You can't justify curiosity.
But her homework.
With an excuse, really, isn't it? I've seen far worse. The truth is, we're both curious about Susan, and we won't be happy until we know some of the answers.
You can't just pass it off like that. If I thought I was just being a busybody, I'd go straight home. I thought you agreed she was a bit of a mystery.
Yes, but I think you'll find that's a very simple explanation for all this.
Well, I don't know how you explain the fact that a teenage girl doesn't know how many shillings there are in a pound.
Really?
Really? She's thought we were on the decimal system.
Decimal system? Classroom. Day. There is laughter in the classroom. Susan is sitting at her desk, very embarrassed, having realized that she has just made a mistake.
I'm sorry, Miss Wright. Don't be silly, Susan. The United States has a decimal system. You know perfectly well that we do not. Of course, the decimal system hasn't started yet.
Inside the car. Night. I suppose she couldn't be a foreigner. No, it doesn't make sense. Nothing about this girl makes sense. For instance, the other day I was talking about chemical changes. I'd given out the litmus paper to show cause and effect.
And she knew the answer before you'd started?
Well, not quite. The answer simply didn't interest her. Science laboratory. Day.
Yes, I can see red turns to blue, Mr. Cheston. But that's because we are dealing with two inactive chemicals. They only act in relation to each other.
But that's the whole point of the experiment, Susan.
Yes, it's a bit obvious, isn't it? Well, I'm not trying to be rude, but couldn't we deal with two active chemicals? Then red could turn blue all by itself and we could get on with something else. I'm sorry, it was just an idea.
She subsides, conscious that again she has said too much. Inside the car. Night. She means it. These simple experiments are child's play to her.
It's almost got to the point where I deliberately want to trip her up.
Yes, something like that happened the other day. I'd set the class a problem with A, B and C as the 3 dimensions. Classroom. Day. Susan is at the blackboard, visibly upset.
It's impossible unless you use D and E.
D and E? Whatever for? Do the problem, that's it, Susan.
I can't, Mr. Chesterton. You simply can't work with only 3 of the dimensions.
3 of them? Oh, time being the 4th, I suppose. What do you need E for? What do you make the 5th dimension?
Space.
Inside the car. Night.
Too many questions and not enough answers.
Stupid, or just doesn't know. So we have a 15-year-old girl who's absolutely brilliant at some things and excruciating bad at others.
There she is.
Susan approaches, looks around, opens the gates, and goes in, closing them again behind her.
Look, can we go in? I hate to think of her alone in that place.
If she is alone. Look, she is 15. She might be meeting a boy. Didn't that occur to you?
Well, I suppose, almost hope she is.
What do you mean?
Well, it'd be so wonderfully normal. Silly, isn't it? I feel frightened, as if we were about to interfere in something that is best left alone.
Inside the junkyard, Susan pops a sweet into her mouth. She moves off. Inside the car. Come on, let's get it over with. They both get out of the car and cross over to enter the yard.
Don't you feel it?
I take things as they come. Come on. Inside the junkyard. What a mess. I'm not turning over any of this stuff to find her.
Over there?
Ian trips over. Blast! I've dropped it.
What?
The torch.
Use a match.
I haven't got any. Oh, never mind.
Susan?
Silence. Susan? Susan! Ian climbs up some steps and then down again. Susan! Susan! Mr. Chester and Miss Wright. Silence. She can't have got out without us seeing her.
Ian, look at this.
Well, it's a police box. What on earth's it doing here? These things are usually on the street. As he is saying this, he goes up to the box and touches it. Feel it! Feel it! You feel it? Barbara does so.
It's a faint vibration.
It's alive! Ian walks around the police box. It's not connected to anything, unless it's through the floor.
Look, I've had enough. Let's go and find a policeman.
Yes, all right. We hear the sound of coughing.
Is that her?
It's not her. Quick! He pulls her down behind a pile of junk in a corner. We now catch our first glimpse of the doctor as he enters the yard. He is wearing a long dark cloak with a scarf wrapped around his shoulders and a hat. His clothes are somewhat unusual. He stands coughing for a moment. He moves across the yard and approaches the police box. The doctor takes out an ordinary door key and inserts it in the lock. Susan's voice can be heard.
There you are, grandfather. It's Susan.
Shh! The doctor hears this and turns towards where Ian and Barbara are hiding. Ian stands up and moves towards the doctor. Excuse me, what are you doing here? We're looking for a girl. We? Barbara comes out of the shadows.
Good evening.
The doctor regards her carefully. What do you want? One of our pupils, Susan Foreman, came into this yard. Really? In here? Are you sure?
Yes, we saw her from across the street.
The doctor mutters to himself. One of their pupils, not the police, then. I beg your pardon? Why were you spying on her? Who are you? I heard a young girl's voice call out to you. Your hearing must be very acute. I didn't hear anything.
It came from in there.
You imagined it.
I certainly did not imagine it.
The doctor takes Ian by the arm and leads him away from the police box. Young man, is it reasonable to suppose that anybody would be inside a cupboard like that? Would it be, therefore, unreasonable for you to let us have a look inside? The doctor notices a picture frame. I wonder why I haven't seen that before. Now isn't that strange? Very damp and dirty.
Won't you help us? We're two of the teachers from the Cold Hill School. We saw her come in and we haven't seen her leave. Naturally, we're worried.
You'll have to be cleaned. Oh, I'm afraid it's none of my business. I suggest you leave here. He puts the picture frame down. Not until we're satisfied that Susan isn't here. And frankly, I don't understand your attitude. Yours leaves a lot to be desired. Will you open the door? There's nothing in there. Then what are you afraid to show us? Afraid? Oh, go away. I think we'd better go and fetch a policeman. Very well. And you're coming with us. Oh, am I? I don't think so, young man. No, I don't think so.
We can't force him.
But we can't leave him here. Doesn't it seem obvious to you that he's got her locked up in there? Look at it. There's no door handle. Must be a secret lock somewhere. The doctor examines a small jug, listening carefully to their conversation.
That was Susan's voice.
Of course it was. Susan! Susan! Are you in there? It's Mr. Cheston and Miss Wright, Susan. Don't you think you're being rather high-handed, young man? You thought you saw a young girl enter the yard. You imagined you heard her voice. You believe she might be in there. It's not very substantial, is it? He puts the jug down.
But why won't you help us?
I'm not hindering you. If you both want to make fools of yourselves, I suggest you do what you said you do. Go find a policeman, while you nip off quietly in the other direction. Insulting. There's only one way in and out of this yard. I shall be here when you get back. I want to see your faces when you try to explain away your behavior to a policeman. Nevertheless, we're going to find one. Come on, Barbara. They start to leave. Just then, they hear Susan's voice again.
What are you doing out there?
She is in there. Close the door! Ian grabs the doctor's arm. Barbara! Barbara rushes through the door. Inside the spaceship. Barbara and then Ian enter. Susan is standing there by a hexagonal console in the centre of the room. She stares at them in amazement. Ian stops and looks around. The doctor enters behind them. Close the doors, Susan. Susan flicks a switch on the console, and the doors close. I believe these people are known to you. Susan addresses the doctor, and then Ian and Barbara.
They're two of my school teachers. What are you doing here? Where are we?
They must have followed you. That ridiculous school. I knew something like this would happen if we stayed in one place too long.
Why would they follow me? Is this really where you live, Susan? Yes.
And what's wrong with it? But it was just a telephone box. Perhaps.
And this is your grandfather? Yes. Well, why didn't you tell us that?
I don't discuss my private life with strangers. But it was a police telephone box. I walked all around it. Barbara, you saw me. You don't deserve any explanations. You pushed your way in here, uninvited and unwelcome.
I think we ought to leave.
Just a minute. I know this is absurd, but... The doctor studies a clock on a pedestal. Dear, 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 this is very unreliable. I walked all around it. Yes, it stopped again, you know, and I've tried... Oh, you wouldn't understand. But I want to understand. Yes. Oh, by the way, Susan, I managed to find a replacement for that faulty filament. Bit of an amateur job, but I think it'll serve. It's an illusion. It must be. What's he talking about now?
What are you doing here?
You don't understand, so you find excuses. Illusions, indeed. You say you can't fit an enormous building into one of your smaller sitting rooms. No. But you've discovered television, haven't you? Yes. Then, by showing an enormous building on your television screen, you can do what seemed impossible, couldn't you? Well, yes, but I said... No, not quite clear, is it? I can see by your face that you're not certain. You don't understand. Oh, I knew you wouldn't. Never mind. Now then, which switch was it? No. Ah, yes, that is it. The point is not whether you understand. What is going to happen to you? They'll tell everybody about the ship now. Ship? Yes, ship. This doesn't roll along on wheels, you know.
You mean it moves? The TARDIS can go anywhere. TARDIS? I don't understand you, Susan. Well, I made up the name TARDIS from the initials time and relative dimension in space. I thought you both understand when you saw the different dimensions inside from those outside.
Let me get this straight. A thing that looks like a police box standing in a junkyard. It can move anywhere in time and space.
Yes.
Quite so. But that's ridiculous.
Why would they believe us? Well, how can we?
Now, don't get exasperated, Susan. Remember the Red Indian. When he saw the first steam train, his savage mind thought it an illusion too. You're treating us like children. Am I? The children of my civilization would be insulted. Your civilization? Yes, my civilization. I tolerate this century, but I don't enjoy it. Have you ever thought what it's like to be wanderers in the fourth dimension? Have you? To be exiles? Susan and I are cut off from our own planet without friends or protection. But one day we shall get back. Yes, one day. One day. Ian and Barbara look at Susan in sheer disbelief.
It's true. Every word of it's true. You don't know what you've done coming here.
She turns desperately to the doctor.
Grandfather, let them go now, please. If they don't understand, they can't. They can't hurt us at all. I understand these people better than you. Their minds reject things they don't understand.
No. He can't keep us here.
Susan, listen to me. Can't you see that all this is an illusion? It's a game that you and your grandfather are playing, if you like. But you can't expect us to believe it. It's not a game. But Susan, it's not. Look, I love your school. I love England in the 20th century. The last 5 months have been the happiest of my life. But you're one of us. You look like us. You sound like us. I was born in another time, another world.
Now, look here, Susan, you... Oh, come on, Barbara, let's get out of here. They move towards the doors.
No, you can't get out. He won't let you go.
They try unsuccessfully to open the doors. Ian turns angrily to the doctor, who is laughing. You closed the doors from over there. I saw you. Which is it? Which is it? Which control operates the doors? Ian approaches the control console and realizes just how complicated it is. You still think it's all an illusion? I know the free movement in time and space is a scientific dream I don't expect to find solved in a junkyard. Your arrogance is nearly as great as your ignorance. Will you open the door? Open the door! Susan, will you help us?
I mustn't.
Very well then. I'll have to risk it myself. I can't stop you. The doctor quietly operates a switch on the console. Susan realizes too late what the doctor has done and screams a warning to Ian.
Oh, don't touch it! It's live!
Ian's hand reaches the control. There is a crackle, and Ian is violently thrown to the floor. The doctor looks on in triumph. Barbara rushes to Ian, who is shaken but otherwise unhurt.
Ian!
She runs angrily on the doctor.
What on earth do you think you're doing? Grandfather, let them go now, please.
And by tomorrow we shall be a public spectacle, a subject for news and idle gossip.
But they won't say anything.
My dear child, of course they will. Put yourself in their place. They're bound to make some sort of a complaint to the authorities, or at the very least talk to their friends. If I do let them go, Susan, you realize, of course, we must go too.
No, Grandfather. We've had all this out.
There is no alternative, child.
I want to stay. Look, they're both kind people. Why don't you trust them? All you've got to do is ask them to promise to keep our secret and...
It's out of the question.
I won't go, Grandfather. I won't leave the 20th century. I'd rather leave the TARDIS than you.
Now you're being sentimental and childish.
No, I mean it.
Very well. Then you must go with them. I'll open the doors. The doctor walks over to the console.
Are you coming, Susan?
As soon as distracted by Barbara's question, the doctor starts operating the controls on the console. Too late, Susan realizes what he is doing.
Oh, no, Grandfather, no!
Susan tries to pull the doctor away from the controls. Let me go! Get back to the ship side! Hold it! The lights grow brighter and then darker, and the central column starts to rise. The doctor breaks free and operates some further controls. Ian and Barbara are tossed helplessly around. On the scanner, we see a picture of London rapidly fading into the distance, as if the ship has taken off like a rocket. This merges into the title sequence effect, superimposed, over which we see first the face of the doctor, then that of Susan. The pattern resolves into a barren landscape. Inside the ship, the doctor and Susan stand, rather shocked. Barbara has collapsed into a chair, and Ian is unconscious on the floor. Outside the ship, a human-like shadow falls across the landscape. Next episode, The Cave of Skulls.